Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be discussing effective resource management with Project Online and OnePlan. My name is Doug Welsby, and I'm the channel manager here at Wickersoft. I'm also joined by my colleague, Jim Patterson, our Director of Sales. During today's webinar, attendees will be on mute and the line will not be open for questions. However, please feel free to use the GoToWebinar question feature to submit questions. I will address these questions during the webinar and will respond via email if we do not get to your specific question. If for some reason you get distracted or pulled away from the webinar, no need to worry, as I will be emailing a link to the presentation once it has been posted to our YouTube channel. And with that, I'll now turn the presentation over to Jim, who will be handling the webinar.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everybody. Glad you were able to join us and take some time out of your valuable day. Our topic today is one that seems to resonate with a lot of people, the challenges of resource management. And we're going to talk to you about how we can maybe process some effective resource management using Microsoft's Project Online and Wickersoft's OnePlan in tandem to address all aspects of the resource management lifecycle. The topics we want to cover today will include some overall resource management concepts, then talk about resource planning and how it's accomplished in Project Online, and how it's augmented then with OnePlan and the resource capabilities it's added into the mix. We're not going to just talk about concepts. Doug will then show us a live demonstration of these capabilities in action, things that are here today, and show you how you can take advantage of these capabilities in relatively short order. We'll wrap up with some summary of the topics covered and some next steps and some offers for you that have registered and joined us here today for the webinar. So with that, let's get started. So not to get too fundamental, but in kind of a 101 definition of what resource management is. Resource management is the efficient and effective deployment and an allocation of an organization's resources when and where they are needed. Pretty fundamental, pretty basic. But I'm sure people that are attending are at different levels of their resource management knowledge and maturity. Now, why would we want to focus on resource management? Well, there's very clear benefits if we do this and we do this well, or at least progress into doing it well. One is the overall resource visibility. And oftentimes we're flying blind in a lot of organizations. We're not really understanding what's already on our plate and to what degree when we're committing yet to more and more work. And to better understand what's available and what current loads and demands there are will give us a more realistic ability to make commitments. Also to increase business value. If we do this resource management right, the idea is not just to execute on projects well, but to make sure that we're working on the right projects and allocating those resources in a priority fashion to the things that make the most sense, the things that bring the most value to the organization. Also, by being more efficient at this, we'll save time and money for the organization, meaning we'll get the right resources with the right skill sets and maybe do less resource switching or get resources on in a more timely fashion onto projects. And by doing so, we can do things in organizations by doing things like reducing overtime and by increasing efficiencies, thereby reducing costs of delivering these projects. And we can also increase project success rates. If, as I said before, we're flying a little bit blind, oftentimes we blindly commit, not really understanding the impact from a resource perspective or the constraint perspective. And the idea is that sometimes we're already setting ourselves up for failure by making commitments we can't deliver on. We can definitely, by getting better at this discipline, increase our project success rate and the perceived success rate in the eyes of our customers. Also, just to better accommodate demand by having the visibility, all the way early in the cycle, we get, in many organizations, we get request after request after request, and typically we can't do it all. So the question is, how do we match that demand with our capacity and be able to accommodate that in a way that gets these things allocated in the right fashion? And employee satisfaction is a big one. You know, the people that actually have to do the work on the employee side you know, often referred to in this webinar as resources. But if we have unrealistic workloads being put on everyone, it can lead to a lot of frustration. It can lead to a lot of dissatisfaction, and even lead to turnover, meaning it could impact the organization even more broadly than on an individual project or portfolio or project basis. So just some of the areas of benefits that we can achieve. Now, resource management challenges come in a lot of shapes and forms, but these are some of the common ones that we run into. One is resource ownership. Many organizations today of size are matrixed organizations, meaning there's project organizations that are responsible for delivering on the projects, and there's functional or resource management organizations that actually own the resources that have to be deployed into these. And it really requires some level of collaboration, negotiation, and working together to make sure that everything comes together so that we can come out at the end line with a successful set of projects with the resources that we need. And then there's resource focus. When we do not have a comprehensive resource management approach or systems to do this, oftentimes resources are not real clear on what their priorities should be and of all the workloads on what they should tackle first, or if they have operational demands that maybe come first, how much of their bandwidth should be applied to that versus the project-related or more discretionary type of work. So these are things that challenges that need to be addressed as part of the mix. Non-project workload. Sometimes assumptions are made based upon resources being too broadly available for project-specific work. And if we have the wrong assumptions there or plan or make commitments based on faulty assumptions, the ability for us to deliver and succeed and deliver when we say we're going to deliver with a quality product gets impacted. And then just resource tracking. Once we decide what it is we want to do or kind of forecast what it is what we want to apply as far as resources, at what level of detail are we going to track the resources? Are we actually spending or burning the resources in the way that we planned? Is the actual availability impacted by the fact that we're maybe not working on the things that we plan to work on? And the idea is to be able to reconcile all that and understand where resources are working at any given point in time. Overall resource visibility. Understanding who's working on what, so as new things come in, we can maybe understand trade-offs, maybe understand where we might be able to pull a resource off of maybe a lower priority thing to work on a more higher priority effort or initiative. And then ultimately, if we're doing things manually or in, say, a bunch of disconnected spreadsheets, for example, the reporting becomes a very manual process. If we have a lot of different data sources for this information, people are generally estimating, mashing up the data in the first place, which is a data exercise in and of itself, and then having to manually generate reports off of that disconnected data. It can be very time-consuming and inefficient, and often a place where we can achieve great savings. And then ultimately, we can end up with too much information. Resource information in resource management tends to be very granular. It can get down to individual resource assignments. It can be time-phased data on a daily or weekly basis. So it can end up really being a overabundance of information, or data, I should say. It can sometimes in spreadsheets look very much like an eye chart. And how do we turn that information, that data, into useful information and decision support that can help the organization? Now, very closely aligned to the way the Gartner Group sees the world, there are different resource management steps that we can take. And then this really aligns with some evolution of maturity in our resource management capabilities within an organization. And the graphic here represents the stepping stones that we may want to take. And some of the things we're going to focus on today is really around resource capacity planning. And the reason we like to start there is because that usually ends up being the area and the level of detail that organizations can seem to tackle best first. Resource capacity is often done at a very high level, on a role basis, on an FTE basis per project, and be able to just have a sanity check to see, do we have the resources and those types of resources available in general, and do we in general have a capability to deliver based upon the requests that are being made. And the idea is that organizations can start there because it's something that they can actually get their people on board with, get them trained, and from just a process rigor perspective, be able to sustain it. The next step is really about resource allocation, is basically taking those high-level capacity plans and then specifically looking at getting specific resources allocated to specific pieces of work within that, and the specific named individuals being tagged with those roles, and be able to manage that on an ongoing basis. Then resource work management is really about taking that to the next level of specific people being assigned to work, but then looking at overall work management, meaning we're factoring in things like the operational work and the competing priorities that they may have outside of the project initiatives, And the idea is we're looking at a total work focus in that stage. And then teamwork management is really where we get those first three kind of going along and we're improving at those processes. But then our team dynamics and our improvement in effectiveness of our teams working together, better throughput, better efficiencies, more velocity in the agile world. The idea is that continuous improvement of the team going through that process is that next level of maturity. And then overall, with the personal work management, if we have the processes in place and the automation and the teams working along, if we have the processes, the tools, and the mechanisms in place, individually, we can actually hone our skills and become the best we can be in our work management perspective and being contributing resources that are best contributing to that organization. So the Gardner Group, kind of looks at this thing in the same way that we do here at Wickersaw, is that we have to align what we're doing with where we're at. We have to be honest with ourselves as an organization of where we stand today from a maturity level. And we do believe in all aspects of putting in project and portfolio management, including resource management, that we should take a crawl, walk, run approach to this. By no means should we be constrained by these levels or where we're at. We should definitely have a focus on improvement and advancing ourselves as an organization. But let's start with where we are at and where we really think we can sustain. If we look at maturity level 2, which Gartner defines as a crawl stage, notice that we're really only defining high-level project roles and staff. We're potentially prioritizing projects and programs and understanding where we want to put that workload, right? And only really starting projects that can be resourced. But notice that in the color coding, it's a resource capacity planning or a high-level resource planning level at this stage. It's only until we get into level 3 in that walk stage where we go down to more detailed resource allocations and take that next step, and where we're actually moving from FTEs to maybe to named individuals, confirming that they have the skill sets, confirming that the assignments and the durations make sense with the estimates, potentially getting into the concept of soft booking resources before we actually commit them, and then assigning the right resources to actually individual tasks within the project. And that's a next step or next phase in the process. And the solutions we're going to talk about today really support these levels of that and beyond. And then as we're considering how we're going to do resource management in our own individual organizations, we have to factor in these different resource management maturity dimensions. As we mentioned, are we going to look at just roles and high-level capacity? Or are we going to talk about named individual resources or a combination of both? What planning or tracking granularity are we going to use? Are we going to plan things at a project level, down to a task level, or maybe something on the interim basis? Resource costs. These solutions often have rates associated with these resources, and are we going to track and use roll-ups and turn them into dollars so we understand the labor costs within our projects? Are we going to just forecast resources? Some folks start out by just saying, I want to build a capacity plan so I can forecast and make sure that that forecast aligns with our ability and the headcount that we do have, so that we can, on a rolling basis, understand what we have ahead of us. So as new work comes in, we can at least align in general with what we have and our ability to deliver resources to the projects and initiatives. Or do we also want to track actuals? Do we want people to be able to go in and track time so we can understand what the burn rates actually are and how well those align with the forecasts? And also the governance and prioritization. In a fully functional system, resource management is not standalone. It really is tied and integral and part of an overall PPM solution. And when you do that, we should be aligning that with governance, meaning we can make sure we're working on the right things, aligning it with the missions and the strategies of the organization, and also properly prioritize the work so that we can sequence that work and decide what we should be tackling first. That's something that really leverages the benefit of resource management if we tie that in very nicely within that whole package. And then in the matrixed organizations, like we talked about earlier on, approvals and negotiations may be required, where a project organization may be able to tell you, here's what we have on our plate, and this is what we think we need as types of resources, but then being able to negotiate with the functional or resource managers who own those resources, what resources we're going to have or what we're going to get for those projects and who specifically is going to work on those projects for us. You don't have to tackle all these dimensions to be successful in starting your roadmap and your journey into doing better resource management, but these are definitely areas to consider as where you are, where you'd like to be, and how you'd like to step into this on a stepping stone type of approach. Ultimately, when we talk about capacity planning from a top-down perspective and then resource allocation from a more bottoms-up allocation to specific pieces of work, we really want to be able to balance the top-down and the bottom-up. Some folks stay at the high level. Some folks do the high-level planning early on in the life cycle as they're justifying a project. But then ultimately, if the bottoms-up comes, you want to understand, does that bottom-up allocation, how does it relate? And it isn't always going to totally align with that top-down assumption and planning that you do, but we want to basically have a feel for is what we're doing tactically on a detailed basis and executing on these projects. Is it relating and aligning with what we planned with originally? And do we have to adjust our assumptions moving forward? Now, if we look at the use of roles, and this is where people start with capacity planning and demand and portfolio management, it really should be dovetailed with the overall project and portfolio management process and the governance process in your organization. If we look up top from very early on when we get ideas and requests and we try to move towards a go, no-go decision, or ultimately in complex projects that require funding and capital dollars, get a full-blown business case put together. And that may include some preliminary resource estimates of what we think it's going to take and actually to deliver that project even before we get it proposed. And even before we have a proposed portfolio, in parallel with that, we're doing the resource management process pieces. We're identifying generic roles in our pool. We're determining the quantity of each role that we have in the organization. We're potentially identifying maybe the high value or constraining resources, the most scarce resources we have, the ones that are hardest to get on projects, and determine what those are so that we understand how that may impact our throughput of our portfolio projects. But really where the proposed portfolio comes together with resource management, then we start saying, all right, let's time sequence these pieces of information, the projects and the resources needed themselves, and have them come together at that stage. And then when we do that, and we have a proposed roadmap of what we want to do with our projects, our governance and our steering committees can then evaluate and approve the portfolio by selecting the projects or time phasing the projects or prioritizing those projects. And ultimately, we're matching high-level demand or requests to the supply that we have. And then once we have the projects that have been approved, we can then request specific resource allocation to get named specific individuals on that. Now, obviously, processes in different organizations have variations on this theme, but this tends to be, in general, a typical flow that we see in the customers that we work with. Ultimately, in understanding resource capacity, we want to reconcile capacity with demand. We want to make sure that they come as close as we can. We don't want the demand that we take on to greatly exceed the capacity that we have, nor do we want to undershoot the target as well. On the capacity side, we need to determine how many people do we have that can do work on projects and how much of their time is available and what roles and skills can they offer and what roles can they play in these projects. On the demand side of things, we need to determine the resources that are required for each individual project that's being proposed, and then prioritize those projects and then allocate the resources based on the role and priority until the resources are exhausted. Not physically exhausted, but until they're gone, until we don't have any more. Ultimately, we want to develop projects based on committed availability and to take on projects based upon committed availability of our resources. And in a mature organization, if we're not flying blind and we have the tools and the visibility at our disposal, we have the power then to not start projects if resources are unavailable. Or if they are unavailable, maybe start even discussing more mature things like trade-offs and what projects to put on hold and what to pull resources from in order to work on these new initiatives that are coming down. So from a resource management next steps perspective, there's no one size fits all, but I would say this. Be honest with ourselves. Let's assess our readiness. Let's be honest with ourselves of where we are at today. My mother would always tell me when I was at the dinner table, my eyes were bigger than my stomach. And the same can be true for what we want out of our solutions and our processes. Let's be grounded in reality. And let's also understand our resource management maturity. Like, we may be doing some good things from a project management perspective overall, but maybe the resource dimension, maybe we're less mature as an organization, or maybe we have pockets in the organization that are more mature than others. And overall, understand the environment, because we have to factor in our culture and other barriers that we might have to success, and then build a plan that actually assesses that environment, that culture, and put something in place that will be accepted and adopted. And then let's build a resource management roadmap. Let's not try to tackle everything at once. Let's figure out what we can do today and make that an early phase in our crawl stage, but then have a plan for how we're going to incrementally move on into that next stages or level of maturity till we get to the level that we want to be. And then develop a practical action plan to get to that next maturity level and have some defined steps to make that happen. Ultimately, we're going to talk about systems here today and solutions, but you should define your process first. Understand what that process and what that flow should be, and then automate it. Oftentimes we get into folks that say, give me a solution and automate. But if we're automating a process that doesn't exist or is unclear, it may impact your ability to be successful in rolling it out. So the idea is we want to have an idea of what that process looks like before we actually put it into a solution and automate it. So how do organizations manage these resources today? Well, for the most part, if they're not using a common solution like we're talking about today, they're often using something like Excel. And they're doing it because it's freely available. Most people know how to use it. And they may not be unaware of alternatives, or they may not have alternatives at their disposal. So they innovate, and they do a lot of jury rigging of Excel in order to come up with some standalone resource management dimension of what this is. But it's often disconnected from the rest of the project management, portfolio management process when we do this. The problem with Excel is that there's lack of standards. It's very freeform. It's a manual and static model where resource management is very fluid. And every time there's changes in time phasing, the ripple effect of that makes it very hard to keep it up to date. The nature of Excel, it's easy to break formulas and calculations, so the veracity of the data can sometimes be questioned in the roll-ups. And there's no dynamic visibility of resource capacity as new people come on and our staffing levels change. So the idea here is that there's not an ideal way to do it, but it's something that we've done because we're trying to fill a need with the tools we have at our disposal. So more transformative options that we have is really about embedding our processes into a common solution, something with a central database repository that isn't disconnected from the rest of the project and portfolio management process. And the key there is to have a central data store that's accumulating rich sets of data that will give us actionable intelligence and a set of decision support information on the resource management aspects that are a natural output of the process, something we don't have to compile, something we don't have to mash up data with, something we don't have to manually build each and every reporting cycle. So those are some of the things that we can do to save time and effort and provide efficiencies and add value. Now, Microsoft Project Online is just a central repository. It's just, I don't mean just, but I mean it's the central repository and set of core capabilities that we're talking about in this realm. And resource management is a very important aspect of that. It does provide some provisions for top-down capacity planning and some bottom-up resource allocation, like people who are familiar with Microsoft Project often think it only does, is that bottoms-up resource assignment, and even a timesheet capability. And what we're going to talk about here today is how Microsoft deploys that and then augments it with some additional capabilities and user experience. What Doug is going to start demonstrating to you today, and I'm not going to steal his thunder, but the idea is we can do visual, web-based resource capacity planning within projects, be able to look at a project-by-project or proposed project-by-project basis and start planning out those resources in the context of what's needed on that project, but also with an eye on what's already been allocated for those particular resources that we have in mind. And then for resource managers, be able to look at this planning organizational-wide, whether it's my resources that I'm functionally responsible for, and be able to look at the aggregate of everything that they're committed to, and be able to do trade-offs and allocations and substitute resources and those types of things. And then being able to leverage this for strategic portfolio analysis. One of the benefits of being able to have a composite set of resource information is that as we look at our entire portfolio of projects and efforts, we can start selecting, deselecting projects, moving projects out in time, and looking what effect that might have dynamically on the ability to deliver resources, or whether we're over or under allocated or constrained at any given point in time. And then the reporting and the analysis. We're going to talk a little bit about today about reports that give you information into useful data, turning into useful information so that you can make decisions and look at where resources are maybe overused or abused, or understand where I may have capacity, or where I might have to staff up or contract additional help. And then a side benefit of this, is just an aside, is that as we do resource capacity planning, it can impact our project financials if we're interested in that. Our resource planning can actually feed financial plans that dollarize and turn into financials the labor costs of our projects, so that all we have to track individually are things like, the travel and expense and hardware, software, and other related expense. But the labor could be covered by the way we track resources. So with that, I think I've spoken enough about the concepts. I'd like to turn this over to Doug Welsby and have him demonstrate the capabilities of Project Online in conjunction with OnePlan. Take it away, Doug.
Great. Thanks very much, Jim. Just want to double check that you can see screens as I'm presenting.
I can, and I can hear you.
Great. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. As Jim's mentioned, we're going to take you through a bit of a demonstration of the resource management capabilities of our OnePlan solution, fully integrated with Project Online. What I'm showing here is the homepage for Microsoft Project Online. And as you can see on screen, I have a number of projects that I've made my favorites within this portfolio, including individual projects that are potentially in flight and being delivered, such as the social networking integration or this VoIP phones project. And then this roadmap that we have set out for ourselves, a portfolio of projects that we're considering for this upcoming fictional fiscal year within the Hokudemo company, where we're going to be cutting costs within the organization and embarking on a bit of a journey with projects and some various scenarios focused on cutting costs within the organization. So I click on that cut cost portfolio. I'm showing you the project home leading to the project roadmap feature within the new road mapping capability of Project Online, just to show you that we built out a scenario here with a variety of different proposed projects, social networking initiative, Fabricam development, VoIP phones, etc., all part of that same portfolio. So top-down planning built right into Project Online using this road mapping feature. Within that roadmap, I want to navigate through and build out the business cases for each of those individual roadmaps and portfolios that we've proposed. So here I am in Project Online. I click through to my portfolios area, and here I'm showing you that we've added to the proposed portfolios 5 different portfolios of projects that we're considering: create competitive advantages, product innovation, etc. And there's that cut cost portfolio. And you can see that as I click into it and open up to expose the details of that cut cost portfolio, you'll see we've captured within this scenario some general information about the proposed portfolio, some information about the business case, where we've given it a description and a value statement. We may go through some prioritization type activities to determine the prioritization of this particular portfolio compared to others. And as part of this initiative, as we're looking forward in time, thinking about this portfolio, the reason we're here today, and one of the elements that's critical to most organizations, is of course resource planning within those portfolios to examine the status of the resources and the requirements for that particular portfolio. So here we're looking at our cut costs portfolio as it's proposed for this upcoming year. You'll see that within the portfolio, I have stacked out some requirements for infrastructure resources, developers, some DBAs and project managers, etc. We have a heat map type indicator showing us within this high level proposal what our capacity for those resources is and what the demand on those resources is looking like and how it's affecting them. So for example, if I hover over the developer resource, we see we have a capacity of 500% or 5 developer resources, and we're under allocated or at 300% for the Q1 of 2019. When I move across and start to look at the other areas that are highlighted in red, we see that the over allocations are popping up in this view to show us where we've committed or thinking about committing too many developers to this specific portfolio of proposed projects. So if you're thinking about this from the angle of a portfolio manager, someone within your organization who is considering your initiatives for an upcoming fiscal year. You would, of course, want to build out the business case for each one of those, but equally as important, because many organizations are thinking about their resource requirements, build out this proposed resource, high-level resource plan using the OnePlan resource planning capabilities. Now we can do other things in here. I could go in, for example, and just simply add a tester to this particular project, navigate through and start to add the tester and put them into various periods. At this point in time, I'm planning at a quarterly level, and I'll show you later we can go even more granular than that. But maybe I just need that person 50% of their time through Q2 and Q3. We might also anticipate that this cost-cutting measure is going to extend into the following fiscal year as well. So I can change my date range, apply a custom range to this view, switch this to 2020 and say I want to go right through to Q2 for 2020. And when I apply that, you'll see now that we've extended the grid out and we can start to add additional budgeted values for those various resources that we've assigned to this tentative resource plan for that cost-cutting portfolio that we're considering. So that's from a portfolio manager or a top-down type of scenario. We might also be planning resources bottom up. So let's say that as part of this considered portfolio, rather than looking at a very high level, we've now said, okay, we're getting ready to proceed. And what we want to do now is start to ask the individual project managers who will be contributing to this portfolio to give us an assessment of their resource requirements. So within that portfolio is my social networking integration project that's being proposed. I can click through to it from here. This plan happens to be open. I've got it open already for the demo. We see the social networking integration project, which has been proposed as part of that cost-cutting portfolio. And in this view, you'll see that we're currently in the initiation phase and we're waiting for budget approval on that project. We're building out a resource plan, estimating some costs, anticipating approval for it, but providing sufficient information for the resource planner and financial planners to make a determination of whether or not we have enough resources and enough budget to be able to deliver this project. So within that social networking integration project plan, I click through to the OnePlan for it. We open up the OnePlan view. We have a couple of different views available, including resource planning and financial planning for these projects. And within the detailed OnePlan, you'll see here I have a resource plan that I've established for this particular project. I'm doing more granular planning at this point. So you'll see that I've changed my view to show the date range at a monthly level rather than for the entire year at a quarterly level. And in this case, I'm still planning and estimating my resource requirements in terms of percentages. But of course, we could change that view to plan for resources using hours or using FTEs, whatever you're most comfortable with within this area. There's other elements to this view as well. You'll notice that within each one of these resources, I could add a note to add some comments about those various resource requirements. So here I've added a note saying that we need the same PM for the duration of the project. You'll also see here that I can make some of these resource thoughts that I have, if you would, this tentative plan that I'm making out. I can make them public or keep them private for now as I just start to scope this out. And what that means is it's hidden from the resource manager role that we'll be looking at in a minute, so that that resource manager doesn't quickly start to see views and grids like we're exposing here with red indicators all over it where particular resources or types of resources are over allocated. The other thing within this resource planning view is you'll see that each of these columns is labeled budget. We can of course change that through a configuration within OnePlan. In fact, we have other types of categorization available in this demonstration environment. You could go with one, or you could add additional ones for example for tracking not only a budget, but a forecast, or subsequent to commencing the delivery, maybe even start to track actuals within this view as well. So lots of flexibility within these views to build out resource plans, to think about what the team needs to look like for this project, and to estimate your resource requirements overall for the upcoming period, for the upcoming year for this proposed project. And then finally, thinking forward some more, once you have devised this team and you might have approval for this particular project, at that point in time, we can start to substitute in named resources for some of these generic resources that are in this plan. So what I could do is open up my view of all of the resources that I have access to. I can find resources based on role and search for that business analyst role. The bottom one in that top view showing my business analyst requirements from May through to August. And so when I filter on business analysts, you'll see that I'm able to see a view of all of the resources that have been identified as business analysts. I can pick, just as an example, Adam. He has full availability, 100% availability throughout the year, so he's not assigned to any projects yet. I can see very quickly that Amy's been assigned to the hub upgrade and the collections management system projects. Grace has been assigned to some other projects as well, in this case at 100% of her time, so she's not a good candidate for this project. But Adam is a good candidate, and I can select Adam there, select him in the top half of this view, and simply replace that resource with Adam on the team. He's now been added out as someone who's a candidate for this particular social network integration resource plan. And then finally, as Jim mentioned, many of you are still planning in Excel. It's still being used for high-level resource planning, assessment of your resource requirements for your projects. And of course, there's even organizations that are still doing scheduling with Microsoft Excel. We can, of course, export out these resource plans that we're building to an Excel format or other types of formats as you see supported, comma delimited, text, HTML, etc. And if I highlight and show you that resource plan for this particular project, here's the export into Excel showing me the project manager, tester, developer, etc., and their budgeted requirements together with this time-phased grid. So you have full flexibility to work within this web-based view, but also to be able to export that information out into Excel if you want to preserve it, or if there's still an Excel-based type of functionality happening in your organization, you need to use that. So let's change hats again. We went from a top-down portfolio management view to a bottom-up project manager view, building out individual plans. Let's think about what that looks like for a resource manager within the organization. So resource managers get to view the plans for all of the resources across the organization that have been proposed through OnePlan. So as a resource manager, I can use the OnePlan resource planning feature to view that roll up and that consolidation of all my resources across all of the plans. So there's Amy. We see her on the hub upgrade, the collections management system project. There's Daniel. He's been assigned to a couple of projects. We see the business analyst, the DBA, the developer, etc. They're all assigned to different plans, and we have a full view of this calendar year showing us all of those resources and their assignments across those plans, together with this heat map indicator to show us the problem areas. So there's Amy with some issues in the month of July. We see we've got some challenges with testers in the months of August and September. So this consolidates all of that information from all of those OnePlans in a handy view to show that resource planner, that resource manager, where the challenges are. We can also filter this and show, for example, generics only. So we see, or rather not generics, but non-generic roles. And in this case, we're focused just on the humans, the Daniels, Grace, and Lori's, etc., that we're interested in examining the resource over allocation issues for. What we can do at that point in time is show that Amy is committed to or working on this hub upgrade and this collection management system project as well. We have a bit of a challenge in the month of July in that she's over allocated. You'll also see on the left that we've indicated that we've previously committed her to that collections management system. That's what that checkbox means in this particular column, but she's proposed on the hub upgrade project. So the project manager has gone through and built out a resource OnePlan for that hub upgrade project, proposed Amy, and now that's causing us an overallocation in the month of July. So as a resource manager, I can find a solution for that. So I expose my resources in the lower half. And what I want to do is search by role for Amy. She's a business analyst. And when I open this up, I see all of the other business analysts that are available to me to select from. I can once again pick a resource that will meet my needs for that project, not as the project manager, but now as a resource manager for the organization. So this should look familiar. I did this as a project manager, substituting a generic resource with a human resource for my team. But if your process in your organization doesn't support that, and many organizations do that, where they allow project managers to plan with largely generics and or only assign resources that work for them on their particular team, the resource manager in turn could substitute and replace that resource appropriately. So I can take that hub upgrade project, pick Adam in the lower half, replace the resource, and if you watch the top half of the screen as I click on replace resource, you'll see that Adam now has picked up that hub upgrade assignment. He's now the resource assigned on that particular project. Amy's gone green. She's no longer over allocated in July, and the overall planning is moving along with removal of those over allocations for those particular resources. And then finally, as the resource manager, I can also click through here and commit that resource so that Adam on the hub upgrade project is now a committed resource, and that project manager for the hub upgrade project will receive that information about that over allocation, or excuse me, not the over allocation, but the substitution of that resource. And then afterwards, after we've gone through top down, bottom up, and I'll call it middle level resource planning, we still have an opportunity to do some portfolio analytics within the OnePlan environment. Now I'll just flip back momentarily to the social networking integration project. We're looking at a resource plan for this project. Jim mentioned that we can also mix in financials, and while that's not a focus of the webinar today, of course, resources have costs for the organization. And as part of portfolio analytics, you do want to assess the all-up costs for your projects, including not only capital or operational costs such as travel and expenses, contracts, software, et cetera, but of course those labor costs as well. So if we look at the labor values, we've imported those from the resource plan. They're visible in this view to show us our all-up costs and a total budget estimate for this project, including labor and non-labor estimates to be able to deliver on this project. So as I navigate through to my OnePlan portfolio analytics view, this view is showing us our projects by portfolio. We see we have create competitive advantages, provide information. We started with this several minutes ago, and there's that cost-cutting portfolio that we were examining for this fiscal year, along with a number of projects that have been proposed within that, some of which are active and some are newly proposed projects that we're considering for the upcoming period. I can change this view around to group by state, just as an example. Revert back to the portfolio view and show you that within this view, we also are exposing other columns of information, including budget, benefits, the portfolio it belongs to, other ways of categorizing these different proposed or active projects, including status, revenue, who the customer is that you might be delivering it for, et cetera, all of these are configurable elements that can easily be added within these views in a similar fashion to what one might do if they were managing portfolios or doing prioritization with an Excel spreadsheet. So within this view, once again, I'm able to mix in to this portfolio selection, not only a view showing me budget and benefits to help me with the prioritization, but I can also now overlay that information with my resource plans. So I assembled all those resource plans. We're looking at this portfolio of projects. I can group again or organize this by state and see some of them that are proposed and some of them that are active. And in this view, as I show Daniel Williams in the lower half being over allocated in the month of April, I see that he's on the iOS project and the hub upgrade project, and there in the top half of that screen, that hub upgrade project has been proposed. Now, this is a bit of a straightforward example of how to show prioritization and selection deselection as you do some portfolio analytics around this particular scenario. But all I need to do is say, well, that proposed project, if I just remove that, that's going to remove that allocation for Daniel Williams from that lower half of the screen, and that scenario turns his schedule, his allocations, green everywhere. So that'll definitely assist us with that analysis of all of the resource requirements for this portfolio of projects. And then finally, as I mentioned, we also map resource plans and directly into the financial plans as well. And we can do that same portfolio analytics exercise around finances as well. So what's our budget looking like month by month for this proposed and active portfolio? We can examine the financial costs in the lower half of the screen. So these are all fully integrated views with Project Online, adding value to the Project Online environment, working as a Microsoft OnePlan solution for resource planning, related financial planning, portfolio prioritization, and of course, analytics on that portfolio view to show us a proposed or an active state of projects, helping us to make some decisions around which projects make the most sense, which projects we have sufficient resources and or finances for as well. And then finally, we can take this same information that we're viewing within OnePlan, and because we're storing this in a database where we can access the information using the same data feed as Project Online, we can render reports such as this resource dashboard report using Microsoft's Power BI reporting capabilities. So out of the box, with Project Online, Microsoft provides Power BI dashboards to provide you insights into all of your active projects, resources, issues and risks, other elements important to the delivery lifecycle of your projects. And with OnePlan, we've chosen to deliver that in the same fashion. So full reporting capability within the dashboards that we're showing here of Power BI and our OnePlan resource dashboard. I can switch that resource or position role to the DBA resource, for example. And that'll refresh these screens and show me within this resource dashboard the anticipated load on the DBA resources. Switch it to the developer view. Similar type of report is exposed, showing us the top allocated resources, work versus capacity, and complete details in this particular timeline of what's happening with those proposed or active resources on those projects. Utilization views show us the next level of detail. So work versus capacity for all of these resources in a time-phased view with work columns, capacity columns, remaining availability calculated for us, and showing us, for example, for this resource for Catherine, that she's way over allocated in the month of September 2018. And moving forward in time, we see all of the data exposed in a very consumable Power BI flexible dashboard type view. And then finally, committed versus planned shows us that decision point around which projects have been proposed, which ones are committed, and what the impact on those various resources will be as we consider or look forward in time and think about a portfolio of proposed projects. So with that, I'd like to wrap up this part of the demonstration by repeating that OnePlan for resource planning and related finance planning and the analytics around that, again, fully integrated with your Project Online environment, same resource pool, same project proposal, planning, and delivery process, and that whole infrastructure fully integrated within Project Online. So with that, Jim, I turn it over to you to wrap up the presentation.
All right, well, thank you, Doug. Let me grab the screen back here. Can you see me?
I can.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you for the excellent presentation and overview and putting everything in context. I'm glad that we were able to demonstrate to the audience the fundamentals of the resource planning, but also how it can be leveraged for financials as well as what-if scenario planning with portfolio analysis. So great job. In summarization, let's talk about some of the high-level points that we made here today and wrap this up nicely. One, resource management is a critical success factor for overall PPM success, and that your approach and processes should align with your organizational readiness and maturity. We established that high-level capacity planning is likely a good place for you to start, but that more detailed resource allocation can follow as you are ready or as it is even needed by the organization. Project Online provides a great platform for all the PPM capabilities we talked about today, but Wickersoft's OnePlan extends to provide enhanced visual web-based planning and capabilities, and also enhances all of the top-down aspects with the drag and drop and selection stuff that Doug showed you in the portfolio analysis. So all the strategic planning and analysis and what-ifing. OnePlan is also fully integrated and embedded or fused within Project Online, so it's really part of the user experience, not something separate and distinct. Would love for you guys to take a closer look at this as we go on through, and maybe we'll talk about some of those things here and some offers we have. About Wickersoft, just so you know, we are a full service provider, and we help people with technology and business transformation. We have advisory services and consulting to help in those transformative efforts with strategy and planning, helping with change management and adoption. That also augments the things we're doing with solutions like we showed you today. On the operational side, we even help people with consulting and staffing to supplement their staff with the right people, as well as training and support. And we also even do managed delivery and managed services, such that we even administer solutions like this for people who don't have the staffing or don't want to allocate that on a managed service basis. We were actually founded as a joint venture with Microsoft in 2002. Microsoft actually is a part owner. So not only are we a multi-gold certified technology partner with Microsoft, we are actually a business partner. And we do all these things in the Microsoft Cloud. We talked about how we do this within Project and Project Online today, but also in Office 365 and SharePoint, also with Azure DevOps, with Agile Portfolio Management, as well as dovetailing this with Microsoft Dynamics 365. So OnePlan really comes into play in all these arenas, and the additional things that Wickersoft brings to the table, including OneConnect with our productized connectors, as well as OneAnalytics, which enhances and provides additional reporting capabilities within Power BI to extend that for people that need that. So the idea of the business solutions area, we have it covered all throughout the Microsoft Cloud platforms. For attending and registering today, we'd like to offer you a free assessment, a remote kind of assessment and discussion and discovery to give you an idea of what it will take to get you into these solutions to the degree that you're ready to do it today. And if you are serious about looking at this stuff and want to dedicate some time into really doing some investigation, we can provide you with a free chaperoned Project Online and OnePlan trial with Wickersoft support across the board. So if you are serious about this, not just kicking tires and just curious, we can definitely support you with a chaperone trial. And if you're not that ready, we showed you some generalized use cases today. We're happy to schedule a personalized one-on-one demo for your organization and talk to you in advance about specific requirements you have so that we can demonstrate those capabilities to you today and work with you on that basis. You can reach out to us at contact@wickersoft.com if you'd like to reach out to us for some further interaction, and we'd love to interact and engage with you on this. And you can go to our different websites. There's wickersoft.com. We also have a Project Online specific area called project-online.com. And we also have a /OnePlan area to get into more details about OnePlan itself. We have in our wickersoft.com/webinars area, we have a whole library of pre-recorded, already done webinars. This one will be up there shortly. And we have a whole roster of upcoming webinars that you can look at and sign up for. So if you're interested and you like what you heard today, we have a lot of depth and a lot of subject matter expertise from different folks who can help you on these different topic areas and solution areas. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining today. You will be getting an email from us with a copy of the slides and a link to the recording of the presentation if you'd like to share that with others. So hopefully we can be of service to you in the future. Have a great day.